instead of being honest with the public, we now know these things were hidden from us deliberately to conceal costs that may have had the 51% margin of people vote a little differently when we had that opportunity for this project. Changing the rules in the game, another life lesson that doesn't bode well with the general public when they feel they've been lied to.
I think Hawaii is headed for a hangman's noose. And I just hope we don't hang ourselves.
I don't know how Kimberly Pine can look at her constituents and say this is going to solve your traffic problems. It's a project about money to be made, and I'm quite sure her constituents are not part of this project's profit.
I consider your action as being accomplices to extortion. I want to define what extortion is. The United States Code, annotated Title 18, Section 871, 1951. Extortion, the obtaining of property from others induced by wrongful use of actual or threatened force, violence, fear, or under the color of official right. That's you guys. Official right. As a council.
Berg, followed by Paul Hummel.
Aloha, everyone. I'm here to let you know that this is about the rule of law. Everyone here, whether you're pro or con rail, needs to hear that if you value a democracy that values the rule of law, you need to, if you would please, follow along.
Actually, I also would like to know the date in which the FTA stated that we were not allowed to petition Congress to amend our contract to include a more efficient, superior, and less costly rail system. And I would appreciate knowing also the date on which the FTA shut the door upon our pursuing other rail alternatives such as the maglev, rubber tire, monorail, etc. And instead, the FDA required us to go with a steel-on-steel rail system. I'd like to hear that answer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I've met with the Federal Transit Administration, who is our federal overseer of Honolulu's mass transit project in Washington, D.C. a number of times. I've asked the question of the FTA that if, for some reason, this body should place on the 2012 general election ballot a question regarding Honolulu's mass transit project, and if that question should be in conflict with the 2008 ballot question regarding steel on steel that passed, could we perhaps be in jeopardy of the federal government requiring Honolulu to reimburse the upwards of $200 million that the federal government has given us thus far for our project? The answer from the FTA was yes. They would come back to Honolulu and require us to pay every cent that they've given us thus far for this project. Mr. Chairman, that's a great concern for me. And that's not hypothetical, Mr. Chairman. That's a definitive. That's a definitive. That's a definitive. That's a definitive. That's a definitive.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
The federal government has assured me that if in fact a charter amendment like this passes, they will indeed come back and require us to repay them. That's not an assumption, it's a fact. It came from the FTA themselves. In light of that fact, Mr. Chairman, I'm unable to support this particular measure moving forward at this time. I think the implications are great. I believe that it's a certainty that the federal government will in fact require Honolulu and our taxpayers to reimburse them for the federal monies that have been expended on our project thus far. And, Mr. Chairman, those consequences will be dire to the people of the city and county of Honolulu. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I will not be able to support this going forward at this time. Thank you.
I am in favor of the rail. However, I think we have been misled into the type of rail. On November 2nd, 2011, and I wish he was here, but he's not, Councilman Anderson said that we were locked into steel on steel, and if we attempted to make that change, the FTA would take their money back. There's a couple of issues. Number one, it's in the county charter that we have to go steel on steel. Number two, it's never been told to anybody that if a resolution was passed changing the venue, then we could change our venue. Anyway, in 2002 and 2011, he said what he said. So I tried to get who he spoke with at the FTA. I asked him on the radio, I sent him emails, he would not respond. So I took it upon myself to communicate with Therese McMillan, who's the director of the FTA. And I explained the situation, and I said, is that reality? And basically what she said was, yes, we would take back the funding once the agreement was signed. So I said, okay, so Councilman Anderson made the statement in 2011 on November 2nd, but the agreement was not signed until December 19th, 2012. So you have basically a year where somebody could have said, hey, you know, if we change the charter and the people vote to change the charter, we could go maybe to maglev or monorail or something like that.
Could you start to summarize, please?
Yeah, where the maximum cost would be about $700 million.
I gave heart to my testimony today, and you all got tonight a colored copy of it. Let's go to page 1. On page 1, it says, on what date did Honolulu forfeit its right to invoke Chapter 5? Well, this very day, you're going to invoke Chapter 5 to change the operational date. However, on November 2nd, 2011, if you look at the timetable, 3 council members, Martin, Anderson, and Harimoto, claimed that they had a date that we lost our right to amend the contract. And all I've asked from everyone is on what date that was. Well, Mr. Grabowskis responded, and he says he doesn't know. But Councilmember Anderson on November 2nd, backed up by Harimoto and Martin, said they did have a date. They knew when the FTA said that the contract would not allow us to do anything but steel wheel. Now, I have in my handout for everyone here that the rules of Chapter 5 of Full Funding Grant Agreement say that after a record of decision is made, because a record of decision doesn't let you spend 1 cent on steel wheel. So in January of 2011, the rules, according to Therese McMillan of the FTA, stated that you could have changed your project scope because Governor Lingle and Brennan Morioka said you could. See, on December 2nd, 2010, Brennan Morioka said and fought for us to change the project scope because taxpayers paid for a report. And when the taxpayers paid for the report, it said the city lied. And they lied by $1.7 billion on the low end.
In 2008, we endured a misinformation campaign aimed successfully at getting majority vote for a steel wheel system. This taxpayer-funded pamphlet was added to every daily newspaper and listed the virtues of steel wheels compared to a rubber tire system at tollways. It conveniently avoided any comparison to urban maglev because steel wheels would have suffered in comparison. You have my written testimony opposing the extension at this time. It also includes 2 quotes from HART's website stating that the FFGA refers to steel on steel and any technology change would not be permitted. In fact, there is absolutely zero steel on steel wording in the FFGA, which instead refers to light metro automated driverless rail vehicles. That description fits not only my preferred urban maglev, but also conventional monorail. Since the website also lists service parameters that do not meet the FFGA's project description, it appears that we already are in violation of federal requirements.
And so when I got elected, 3 weeks after the report was released, it took me 8 months to write this bill to put it on the ballot for you to get out of steel wheel, overpriced by the governor's numbers. What happened was, after 8 months, I had 5 town hall meetings up and down the coast, a couple in town, 5. And then on the hearing date of November 2nd, 2011, when the FTA said you can change it, the attorney said you can change it, the attorney general said you can change it, legal advice, everyone said you can amend the contract. But on November 2nd, 2011, Martin, Anderson, and Harimoto said you can't. And to this very day, they won't tell you who told them.
Can you summarize, please?
It is unthinkable that the federal government would persecute our state by demanding the complete return of expended funds if the entire project isn't completed. That sounds like blackmail. The taxpayer should not be forced in paying whatever price or else. The threats like that are normally made by totalitarian governments.
It's obvious that an overwhelming majority of the public are not in support of the rail as is.
I really am tired of raising my voice and turning out to be an obnoxious person. I don't like myself, and I can't even listen to myself talk, because none of you is reading and following the rule of law.
I'd like to make the point that I'm tired of seeing us West Side residents being co-opted by special interests as though this rail is going to help us. It's not going to help 120,000 of us who don't live anywhere close to the 3 rail stations in Eva. So when you go back to Waiakai and try to explain it to your constituents, don't use me and my friends as an excuse. The folks in Nanakuli, South Eva, Makakilo, Waianae, Makaha, and others in that area have such a long commute to rail, to the 3 rail stations, that we're just not going to take it. And as a proof of that point, on 7 April, the Waianae Coast Neighborhood Board passed a motion that did not support any legislation at the time. This was April, before the legislation made its approval of HB 134 and SB 11. But they did not approve, by unanimous consent, to support extension of the rail surtax. So again, don't use the West Side as the scapegoat and the reason to waste this money. And finally, I want to talk about the 42 minutes that was freely thrown around at the last meeting. 42 minutes is if you live on the rail station and jump in the first train that comes by. Very few people live near the 3 stations that are in Eva. And just for the record, the city's chief transportation planner says, yes, it's 42 minutes. However, and this was in the Star Advertiser in 2010, about 60% of the train riders will reach the train via city bus, which means their total journey could be much longer. The city's alternative rail analysis is 55 minutes, and the final EIS for rail was 65 minutes. So when you hear someone say 42 minutes, they're getting paid by PRP and others to help their campaign. So, and finally, the mayor mentioned that hope, when he talked about the cap. And first of all, these numbers from 3.2, it's really going to be 10 billion, but all that has to happen is that you approve this 81, because then we're a final hostage. Because 2 years from now, when they need another couple billion, it's too late, and you got a whole bunch of new leaders, and the train is a done deal. No matter what the cost, it'll be 10 billion. So the mayor said, in regards to the cap, he hopes it'll come in time and on budget. And, well, frankly, as Colin Powell said quite insightfully, hope is not a strategy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Let's withhold our...
One thing I want to leave you with is a 3-letter word, S-I-N. It might say something about this, but Let us put it everywhere. Stop it now.
Before I start, I just want to let you know all, I filed a complaint to the Honolulu Ethics Commission, and it's under EC 15-118. I recommend the public to file the same complaint to the ethics, to Totto, because this forum, it's not going to happen. They're not going to listen to us. Everybody should file a complaint so it goes to FTA. This is my testimony. I'm opposing this Bill 23. No laugh. This is not funny, Joey Manahan. Thank you. On December 2nd, 2010, a report from our state executive branch produced findings that the financial plan for advancing a steel wheel on steel rails project as portrayed by the city was grossly misrepresented. The report suggests a remedy was available for taxpayers. Our Governor Linda Lingle recommended we scrap the steel wheel rail system as planned and amend the contract with the FTA. Due to the city charter codifying the voters' directive in 2008 to proceed with a steel wheel system, the only way the City Council could legally adopt the Governor's recommendation was to change the city charter. Resolution 11-328 was a measure heard on November 2nd, 2011 to just do that. This resolution offered voters paying for the steel wheel system to have the city charter changed to that of choice of rail technology that could meet the terms and conditions originally brokered with the people. On November 2nd, 2011, 8 council members voted against that resolution, Resolution 11-328. The legislation that sought to adopt the Governor's recommendation that we should explore alternatives to the steel wheel on steel rails project. I was one of those who came to testify in favor of the Governor Lingle's recommendation and wanted the resolution 11-328 to get a hearing, but we got shut down by you guys. Council shut down the people. Anyway, once again, this is my testimony to the ethics that I filed for the ethics complaint. Had the voters opted to change rail system per resolution 11-328 with the following requisite met, Honolulu, as taxpayer, could have amended its contract without a repay per Chapter 5 of the FFGA rules. However, Anderson, Martin, and Harimoto portrayed the circumstances to be that even with these terms and conditions met, Honolulu was prohibited from pursuing any change.
Can you start to summarize, please? Thank you.
Anyway, again, everybody, I recommend file to Totto Ethics Commission a complaint against the rail so we can be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the testifier? Thank you. Please let's record it.
He refuses to provide needed information to the Hart Board and Council. He believes the longer he stalls, he can build, and you will have no choice but to give him a blank check. Kill the bill, force Hart to work out a compromise with the FTA, or cancel the project and work out the penalties.
Excuse me, let's all just respect the speaker.
Grabowski's admitted there is no plan B. He claims the FTA says any changes mean a breach of contract. Adjustments are always made. They won't force us into bankruptcy. Thank you.
When you compare $700 million to $7 billion, I don't want to offend anybody, but the only reason I can think that we're going with that is because the kickbacks are a lot greater.
Echo Charlie 115, 118, Anderson Martin. Harimoto made a false condition to disenfranchise voters. Council members are acting in bad faith knowing this fact.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, has primary investigative jurisdiction of offenses in 18 United States Code 1951, which covers blackmail and extortion. The FBI defines white-collar crime as those illegal acts which are characteristic by deceit, concealment, and violation of trust. The people of Oahu have been deceived. The truth has been concealed. And our public trust has been violated to the max. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Let me be quite blunt. It didn't pass the smell test. You've heard testimony that the public has been deceived, information was withheld, and the rule of law was not followed.
We have many projects that are worth the state's taxes and money, not this project. So stop it when you can before we lose more. And I think the testimony has been adequate that it's never going to pay for itself. Never.
All you have to do is, Councilwoman Kobayashi, is when we're done, call up Mr. Grabowskis and ask him. Boy, 3 council members represented a contract, right, that says you can't have anything but rail, steel wheel rail. So in conclusion, all my handouts for all of you here today and everything I've said, concluding with, here comes the police, they've called them on me before.
We cannot amend without a $200 million repay in effect. Can they show proof where it states? Can they break something out and prove it?
I'm here to beg you to stop the bleeding. Look at the people's faces here. What do you see? Discontent to the max. The only ones that's smiling is the head of Hart and his gang. And sometimes you guys smile.
Instead of building rail better, they're building rail worse. We are all aware of the incredible cost of more than $4,000 per person in our city to build the rail so far. The most expensive rail system in the world. The next expensive system doesn't even come close. Do you understand what a family of 4 could do with $16,000? The Honolulu rail to nowhere. Is this prudent leadership? It's appalling to everyone I speak with.
You know, do we need one federal inquiry like, gee, are we heading for bankruptcy?
Back in February, Hart made a big deal about completing the second mile of the elevated guideway. That's 10% of the guideway, okay? At that time, they were talking a $900 million shortfall. If you extend it to 100%, you could conceivably have a $9 billion shortfall. As Will Rogers once said, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yes, the workers of the building industry certainly deserve to have jobs so they can support their families, but not at the expense of the rest of us and our grandchildren going broke because of this steel rail fiasco. I urge you to cut our losses, stop this inappropriate rail mistake immediately, and start again.
This is our money that you're using to fund individuals that have no idea of what fiscal responsibility is. I am pro-rail, I am pro-union, not this rail. And the public was never given an opportunity to take a look at other alternatives. So please, vote your conscience and follow your heart. And stop this before we are turned into debt slaves that will continue for generations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions?
Aloha, Chair. In this very room, on November 2nd, 2011, the people from District 1 came to this very place because they were told by me and the FDA and the attorneys and researchers that write bills that we could change the rail technology by Chapter 5 of the rules of the FFGA. On November 2nd, 2011, council members made statements that is considered a breach of contract. There's an Ethics Commission complaint, EC 15-118, was filed in February of this year. And it has to do with the fact that council members went to D.C. earlier this year, and they had got the answer that I've been seeking for years. Therese McMillan, head of the FDA, had stated that we, the grantee, all along on November 2nd, 2011, could change and amend the scope of project by the rule of law, because we were not locked in. The record of decision, the final design, our milestones did not affect one's ability to change the scope of project, albeit so long as you don't amend 21 stations, 20 miles to anything else, you don't change level of service. The FTA says you can. Now, Councilmember Anderson is correct, and I'd like to make an apology to him. There are 3 counts in my complaint. He's correct on two of the 3. First of all, if on November 2nd, 2011, the resolution passed, in conclusion, very brief, we would fall at the end of the line. We would lose out on that fiscal cycle of 1 year. But in no circumstances was there a $200 million repay. And Therese McMillan, in her letter to all of you on April 3rd, told you what a repay was. A repay is you would pay everything back after you signed the contract on December 19th, 2012. So when the contract of the FFGA was signed, we were locked into steel wheels. So in conclusion, on November 2nd, 2011, a breach of the contract took place because Chapter 3 of the FFGA says, if the contract is misrepresented, it's terminated. And this contract was misrepresented when it was told to the people. Now, the resolution heard in here was to put it back on the ballot, Chair Kobayashi. It wasn't Berg's rant. It was the people who said, Governor Lingle told us, your numbers don't pan out. Governor Lingle's report, December 2nd, 2010. I was elected 3 weeks after that report, Chair. And I reacted to the governor's report that said the city's numbers don't pan out. Now, the governor's got class. She's not going to call you guys deceitful or all that kind of stuff like I do. But the governor did say, you need to change your scope of project, and she gave alternatives.
Thank you.
I acted on it, and it was taken from the people.
Thank you very much.
So the question is, what date did we lose and forfeit our right to change the level of service? This is to Chuck Totto. Chuck Totto, I'm looking at you, Ethics Commission, Legal Counsel. Chuck, I'm asking them right now, and they won't answer. When did we forfeit our right and have a repay of $200 million?
Thank you, sir.
And none of you will answer. You've got 20 emails from me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for not answering, but the complaint will render this. The rail's done.
Using urban maglev that offers increased ridership by extending the guideway within the existing budget, with O&M cost savings well above $2 billion over 30 years. This is not the time for face-saving measures, but is the time for due diligence and for this council to lead the effort for a 21st century transit solution. As for the resolution, I strongly oppose it. I believe it will create a negative impact on any chance the city has for completing the locally preferred alternative for rail. The state's rip-off of $175 million to date from the surcharge is bad enough and should be eliminated. Any efforts for affordable housing should be addressed through separate legislation not related to rail. The poor performance on rail by the city have brought us to not only calls for truncating the alignment, but for terminating the project completely. You heard my testimony on the 24 stations. I would add that O&M savings from maglev would build a significant number of affordable residences. Any action by this committee to extend the surcharge without changing rail technology or to divert rail funds to affordable housing will be an indication to me and probably many other voters of a lack of sincerity on the part of the council for making best use of our taxpayers' money. Mahalo.
There isn't a management team in this world that can bring this back on budget or on time. It's not possible because the estimates done years and years ago, as people told you so, were done falsely and done deceivously just to get the project going. Now that they've got it going, they just want to milk it and milk it and milk it. It's time to stop the nonsense. I would ask you to read Frank Giannadio's testimony in clear detail. He's got good ideas in there. I would ask that when you ultimately do vote, that you not vote with reservations and insult our intelligence. And I would like to finish with reading a quote from a famous council member. It's a short quote. This was made on KITV Channel 4, December 26, 2014. Quote, "That's what's so frustrating, is that they always cover things up. make excuses, and all the while they're saying on budget and on time. Unquote. Chairwoman Ann Kobayashi. Thank you for your time.
Let me give you some facts based on Hart's numbers. Their publication put out in June said that they'll be able to have 5,000 people an hour riding by 2030. And that it's going to cost us about $500 million a year to maintain the system. If you take the people who are going in on the transit times, it's going to cost over $100 per trip to town and $100 to bring everybody home, just based on Hart's numbers. If we look at the numbers from Bombardier, who the city decided was not qualified to do this, and has built projects all over the country, their project that's been running in Disney World in Florida for 40 years moves 6,000 people an hour. And they're currently finishing a project in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is going to move 48,000 people an hour. That's 10 times what this Insaldo project is going to do. That means that in 3 hours we could move 150,000 people. That would make a difference. But Insaldo is only going to give us 5,000 people an hour. So 15,000 versus 150,000 an hour at $100 a ride. If this thing was properly prepared and planned, there would be no cost to the city and the public, because it could be a profit-making project. But the way that we've planned it, it's to give all the profits away and to give all the costs to the public. It's a terrible travesty that what we're doing to the people of Hawaii. Not only are we doing it for today, but for the next 150 years, we're giving them a technology that King Kamehameha could have ridden, a steel-on-steel wheel train 200 years ago. Instead of getting a technology which could be built in Hawaii, we could give us 4 or 5 times more jobs for the unions, and they would last 20 or 30 years. So please, kill this project and let's get Bombardier back, because the chair asked us to have an alternative plan B. They should have been plan A, but now let's make it plan B. Let's get Bombardier back and give us a real system that will make a difference for the city, instead of a toy which is only going to put money in people's pockets. Thank you.